Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. This is the daily update of the Ukrainian front. As I always use one source Ukrainian, the other source Russian, see where they match or usually they don't. And I have to make a correction, verbal correction. I tried on the video, on a previous video that I posted with the Russians call it a terrorist attack occurring in Bryansk, conducted by the Ukrainian nationalists and so on. I missed the location on the map. It should be a little bit northwest towards Belarus, more than to the Kursk where I indicated. But I tried to change it. I don't know if the change already is showing on the video. Nevertheless, I tried to rectify that. It's about, I don't know, about 30 kilometers difference between the two, or maybe more in straight line. So anyway, let's go with this update from Ukraine, which comes from Ukrinform, and the other one comes from Sputnik. So the March 2nd, 2023, and we have here March 2nd, 2023, from 8 o'clock p.m. Kiev time. War update: Ukraine army 13 times strikes enemy positions, hits ammunition depot. Ukraine's defense forces repel Russian attacks in the Bakhmut area and two other settlements in Donetsk region, while Ukrainian aircraft struck the enemy 13 times over the past day. That's according to an evening update by the General Staff of the Armed Forces Ukrinform reports. And I'm quoting, "In one day, our Air Force delivered 13 strikes on the invaders' manpower and equipment clusters, while missile and artillery units hit an ammunition depot," end quote, the General Staff said. And it is reported that throughout the day, Russian troops carried out 24 airstrikes on the positions of the Ukraine's defense forces and 3 missile strikes on Chasiv Yar, Donetsk region, and Zaporozhye. As a result of the terrorist act, residential buildings were damaged and civilians were killed and wounded. Also, the enemy carried out over 55 strikes using MLR systems, including on the civilian infrastructure of Ulanov Sumy region. The General Staff emphasizes that the threat of further missile strikes remains high throughout the territory of Ukraine. Indeed, the Russians brought 13 warships in the Black Sea, 2 submarines capable of, all of them capable of a salvo of 24 caliber cruise missiles, and I made a video on that one too. According to the update, the operational situation has undergone no significant changes in the Volyn, Polisia, Sivershnya, and Slobozhazhnya directions. The enemy keeps its units near the state border of Ukraine and continues fortifying their positions. No signs of an offensive grouping being formed were detected. In the past day, the Russians fired mortars and artillery at Rizhnivnya, Kotin, Stetsivka, and Slavhorod in Sumy region, as well as the districts of 15 settlements in Kharkiv region. So Sumy region, Kharkiv region under shelling. Sumy region, Kharkiv region. Sumy region, I don't have anything from the Russians. Here, this is the place where in Bryansk, where the Russians claim the terrorist act occurred. Bryansk Governor Alexander Bogomaz reported that a Ukraine Armed Forces sabotage and reconnaissance group infiltrated the territory of the Klimovsky district. They opened fire on a moving vehicle. One person was killed and a 10-year-old child was wounded, according to emergency services. Several people were taken hostage in a local store. So this is one, and we have Sumy region and then Kharkiv. The Russians call it Kharkov, and this is Chernigov by the Russians. See what's happening in Chernihiv. So here we have Russian forces destroyed a warehouse of the UAF 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade. Let's see what's here. Forces of the Zapad group struck Ukraine Armed Forces units using artillery, heavy flamethrowers, and airstrikes. And here, again, that's where they destroyed the warehouse. Here where you have the black automatic weapons, this is where the forces actually meet face to face, the troops. The yellow ones are where the Ukrainians are doing something with their airplanes or with their UFOs, UAVs. Let's see, what is this? Russian air defenses shot down several Ukrainian drones. And here, Russian airspace forces shot down a Ukrainian Sukhoi 24 aircraft. And here, Russian Air Force forces shot down a Ukrainian MiG-8 helicopter. And this, the blue ones, are Ukrainians shelling the Russian positions. So let's go back to the Ukrainians. In the Kupiansk and Liman directions, this is here, and this Liman is somewhere over here. All right, the Russians conducted a number of unsuccessful offensives near the Bilohorivka and Kremina Luhansk region, as well as Spirnia Donetsk region. These are the regions, Luhansk, Donetsk, one north, northeast, and southwest. In the same directions, the invaders' artillery shelled the areas of 17 settlements. And then in the Kharkiv region, Kharkov, Luhansk, and Donetsk region. So artillery shelled. This is right here, I'm assuming, because this is where it's between Kharkiv and Luhansk. And here is Donetsk. In the direction of Bakhmut, Russian troops continue their offensive, storming the town of Bakhmut. That's all they give us. And I'm quoting, our defenders repelled attacks in the area of Bakhmut, Kromov, and Ivanivske settlements of Donetsk region. And then they give us a few settlements that came under enemy fire. Now, where is Bakhmut? Bakhmut is Artemovsk. It's so-called Artemovsk by the Russians right here. Fighting is taking place in the city, and that's advanced here. They're gonna probably surround all this and all this, and when it's done, way to Krematorsk and Slavyansk. All right, let's move back to the Ukrainians. The Russian army continues to attack the positions of Ukraine's defense forces in Avdiivka and Shakhtarsk directions. The invaders saw no success in their offensive towards Kamyanka, Severnia, and Marinka of Donetsk region. They're talking about this. Avdiivka, Marinka, and then I'm going to go to Vuhledar. This is, let's see what the Russians are saying. It's Avdiivka. Fighting is taking place in the city outskirts. Russian forces destroyed a communications point and an ammunition depot of the Ukraine Armed Forces 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade, and in Vuhledar of Ugledar, the Russian term name. Fighting is taking place in the city outskirts. Forces of the Vostok Group hit Ukraine Armed Forces units using artillery and airstrikes. Artemov, this is Bakhmut and nothing else over here. Let's go back to the Ukrainians. Areas of 15 settlements were in Vuhledar were hit by enemy shelling. So that they claim this area, but I don't see anything done by the Russians because that would be red, and it's nothing red here. We go down here in Zaporozhye. There's going to be the next paragraph on Zaporozhye, and then the next one is going to be here in Kherson Oblast. So let's go back to the Ukrainians. In the Zaporozhye and Kherson directions, the enemy is on the offensive in some areas, pushing attempts to create conditions for the transition to an offensive. Areas of more than 40 settlements were affected by enemy artillery strikes, or that in Zaporozhye as well Kherson. It was established, so they said that the Russians are shelling the hell out of the Ukrainians. Well, I don't see that happening because I see 1, 2, 3, and here 3, and the rest, the blue ones, are Ukrainians, and then the yellow one again are Ukrainians. Let's see what the Russians supposedly did here. Forces of the Vostok Group hit UAF units using artillery and airstrikes. Forces of the Vostok Group hit UAF units using artillery, and here Russian forces destroyed an S-300 detection radar. And we go here in Kherson. Russian forces destroyed an ammunition depot of the Ukraine Armed Forces 123rd Separate Territorial Defense Brigade. All right, this is in Nikolaskoye, Kherson region. Russian artillery units hit an ordnance depot. They destroyed rockets for the Grad MLRS, shells for the 2A-65 M-STAB-B howitzers and D-30 122mm howitzers, and mortar shells. 5 vehicles were put out of action, 15 UAF soldiers were killed, 7 more were wounded. And this one, Russian artillery units struck deployment points of the UAF unit. 8 vehicles were put out of action, 18 UAF soldiers were killed, 12 others were wounded. And here are just attacks by the Ukrainians and attempts with their drones. Let's see what happened here. Russian air defenses shot down several Ukrainian drones. Let's see what they bombarded here. Ukrainian forces shelled the village using barrel artillery. They fired a total of 16 shells. So that's what they do, Ukrainians here, keep the Russians at bay with their shelling. It was established that a number of schools in the temporary captured territories of Kherson region, starting from the first grade, invaders. Okay, this is propaganda, I'm not reading that. Again, teachers in the temporary captured territory of Zaporozhye and Kherson regions, the Russians intensified filtration measures. I would do that too. In particular, operatives in the Federal Security Service arrived in Pischanivka and Poima of Kherson region. Mass searches of residential premises and mobile phone checks are carried out in populated areas. The invaders focused the most on those whose relatives fled for the territory controlled by Ukraine. As reported by Ukrinform, in the course of the full-scale war against Ukraine, Ukraine's defense forces have already eliminated more than 150,000 Russian invaders, destroyed 3,397 enemy tanks, 6,658 armored combat vehicles, 300 aircraft, 2,058 drones, and many other pieces of enemy equipment. Well, interesting enough, they all keep their mouth tight in telling how many losses the Ukrainian army had. Nevertheless, as I said, they all overemphasize their successes and minimize their losses. Both sides are, remember, this comes from the Ukrainian side and Russian side. They did not really match what one was saying versus the other one. They picked and chose what to add in their updates. Nevertheless, the war goes on. Bakhmut, I made a video earlier today with the Wagner Group posting a picture of some Wagner mercenaries, almost, they claim, almost in the center of Bakhmut. I think it was Reuters or Associated Press verified, and they said, well, no, they were not in the center of town. They were about 1.2 kilometers away from center of town. Okay, whatever. They're in the town fighting. Unfortunately, war is war. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.